Welcome to my channel. Today we have a creepypasta written by Beyond the Door. The House That Lies. John and Jane had finally done it. They had saved up enough money to buy their first home together. It was an old Victorian-style house with a wraparound porch and 12 rooms. The realtor had told them that the house was over 100 years old, and that the previous owner had been a very wealthy man who had passed away in the house. John and Jane didn't care. They were young and in love and couldn't wait to move in and make new memories in the house. On moving day, they brought in boxers and furniture and pictures of family and friends. They even hung a mobile of their 2 children in the master bedroom. The house seemed to hum with energy as they made it their own. That evening, after the movers were gone, and it was just the 4 of them in the house, John and Jane started to explore. They walked through the rooms, turned on all the lights, and even went out onto the porch. It was then that they heard it, a floorboard creaking upstairs. Startled, they turned and ran to the stairs, but whatever had made the noise was gone. "I didn't believe in ghosts before, but I'm starting to think twice," Jane said, her voice trembling slightly. John pulled her close. "Don't worry, honey. If there are ghosts, I'll protect you." He kissed her forehead and led her back to the living room. As the weeks passed, strange things began to happen. At night, they would hear whispers and footsteps above them, but when they checked, they found nothing. Sometimes they would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of the front door opening and closing. When they went to investigate, they found that the door was locked, and there was no one outside. Often in the morning, they would find that the windows that they had closed the night before were wide open. One day, while exploring the attic, they came across a dusty old trunk. As John lifted the lid, a musty smell filled the air and the floorboard beneath them creaked ominously. Inside, they found old clothes, a rocking horse, a music box, and a diary. Jane picked up the diary and brushed off the cobwebs. She opened it and began to read. The diary belonged to a woman named Elizabeth, who had lived in the house over 100 years ago. As Jane read, she felt a cold presence at the foot of the bed. She could feel the bed shaking slightly, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The diary told the story of a woman who was slowly losing her mind, hearing whispers and seeing things that weren't there. She wrote about feeling watched and how she couldn't even find comfort in her own bed. And then one day, she simply disappeared. Jane slammed the book shut. "This house is evil," she whispered, her voice shaking. But John didn't believe her. He thought that the diary was just a product of Elizabeth's overactive imagination. But as time went on, he began to see things for himself. One night, they were awakened by the sound of footsteps in the room. They both looked around, but saw nothing. Then they heard a voice. It was a low, raspy voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It said, "Trick them. Make them believe things that aren't true. Drive them to madness and possess them." The voice then seemed to fade away. John and Jane looked at each other, their eyes wide with fear. What did the voice mean? Was it trying to warn them? Or was it trying to trick them? Then John noticed something. The floorboard beneath him was creaking just like it had that night when they found the diary. He and Jane got out of bed and walked to the spot where the sound had originated. There, they found a loose floorboard, and when they lifted it, they discovered a small hole leading into the crawl space. Curious, they crawled through the hole and found themselves in a dark, musty space. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the only light came from a small crack in the wall. But then, as their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they began to see things. They saw the walls covered with strange symbols and drawings, and then they saw a figure in the distance. It was a tall, thin figure with long, sharp claws. It was hunched over something and seemed to be whispering to himself. John and Jane screamed and ran back to the house. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the house. Once they were safe, they looked back. The house loomed over them, dark and menacing. The windows were like eyes staring out at them. John and Jane never went back to that house. They sold it as quickly as they could and moved away. And to this day, they still don't know what that house is or what it wants from them. All they know is that they were lucky to escape with their lives. The moral of this story is, don't believe everything you see. Sometimes what appears to be real is only a hallucination, a trick of the mind, and sometimes the things we fear the most are only figments of our imagination.